everyone, and welcome to Higher Learning Network. I'm your host, Brittany Burt, and today I have with me Mr. James Feldman, who is the certified facilitator of Shift Happens. Welcome, Mr. Feldman.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So please tell us about Shift Happens.
Shift Happens is all about change and change management. It talks about how you can discover new opportunities using existing resources.
Okay. And you, I know I learned, started this company at the age of what?
Well, my first shift was when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
I asked my parents for an allowance. They told me I could go walk the dog or mow the yard, and it was 105 degrees outside. My mother suggested I open up a lemonade stand. So I went outside and I saw that there were lemonade stands up and down the entire sidewalk.
Wow.
So instead I went in, thought about it for a while, asked my mother if we could go to Shoppers World, which is much like a Costco or a Walmart today, and I priced out bulk lemonade, bulk sugar, bulk paper cups, and made lemonade kits for the mothers. So in the cool evenings I would knock on the door, sell them a lemonade kit, and then the kids could sit outside during the hot sun while I was at the pool.
Wow.
So at the end of that summer I had about $350 in the bank and a very nice tan.
7 years old.
7 years old.
7 years old. So how exactly, when did you decide to start the actual company Shift Happens, and what exactly did you do to get it started?
Well, the term Shift Happens was dealing with change. I mean, we went through all kinds of changes in the economy, and I saw some opportunities. And the name came about because I was in Texas doing some work for McDonald's,
Okay.
and a truck cut me off, and his license plate didn't have the F in shift.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that's an interesting name. I'll just clean it up a little bit, and that's the way the company got named.
Wow. Well, very interesting story. And so I'm sure there was a lot of motivation behind it. What exactly motivated you to start this company?
Well, what started it was I had a lot of customers and a lot of clients that were expressing problems with customer service, problems with leadership, and I started to look at what the problems were. And I recognized that we're a society that's grown up being told, think outside the box.
We are.
But the problem is inside the box. And I've reversed it. And so I developed a process called 3D thinking. And 3D thinking is, the first D is the depth, you go inside the box.
Okay.
The second thing is you can now walk around the box and get a 360 degree of the market. And I talk about that as distance. How far can you take the solution? And then the last part is stepping outside the box and having the determination to be able to carry through with your solution. So it's depth, distance, and determination. And like the pyramids, three-sided, all equal, all having the same value.
Very interesting. So I can imagine you must have to be a pretty extraordinary person to think of all of this on your own. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, you as an individual. What causes you to reach out and think of these ideas for this company?
I'm just hardwired that way. My general attitude is, if you can't make money, then why are you doing it? Now, there's obviously an opportunity to give back to community. There's an opportunity to do good. But at the end of the day, each of us wants to either get a salary or get profits from our efforts.
Definitely.
And I don't take orders very well, so I decided I had to work for myself. And that's kind of how the company started. So my first real company business started when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
And I started taking pictures and charging for the pictures.
Okay. And so your childhood growing up, is that basically all you did, or did you do other things, or have you always just been in the shift?
Well, in terms of the shift is, as you said, I always look at the opportunities that present themselves.
Okay.
One of my favorite stories is that Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity. But the man who invented the electric meter is the one who makes the money. I'm the guy who invents the electric meters.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting, very interesting. So as far as your customers, when they come to you to get these services facilitated to them, what's the first step? What do they do first?
The first step is we ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
The questions are, what's keeping you awake at night? What are your competitors doing that you wish you were doing?
Okay.
What kind of resources do you have? How long have you been in business? Do you have the bandwidth and the backbone to mount the fight? And let's face it, in a competitive environment, there's always somebody bigger, smarter, and faster. If you're going to get into it, you have to get into it for the long haul. And I don't like to lose.
I can imagine. And so when they're answering these questions, do they seem prepared for you, or are they a little distant when it comes to being able to answer these questions? How prepared are they?
Generally speaking, they're almost never prepared.
Never prepared.
And the reason is that they do business as usual.
Okay.
And innovation, by its very nature, is disruptive to business as usual. And so if you don't want to have your entire organization disrupted, I'm not the guy to talk to.
Disrupted. And so do they take direction very well? I mean, I can imagine business owners, entrepreneurs, the idea of having their business disrupted. How do they handle it?
It's like going to a doctor, and the doctor says, if you don't stop smoking, you're going to die. You have a choice.
You do. You do.
And you either listen to the doctor or you say, well, it isn't going to happen to me. Same thing when you come to somebody like myself. I can diagnose the company situation. I can realize what the opportunity is or isn't and be very disconnected emotionally. Everything's about money.
Okay.
Money's a way of keeping score.
Right.
If you can't keep score and you don't know your numbers, then perhaps you shouldn't be in business.
This is true. Very true. Okay. And so the process that you put them through, is it a pretty strenuous process for you as well? How long does it take you to decide what a business needs or what they need to do?
Well, often they come to me with a problem that they've discovered on their own.
Okay.
My competitor is beating my pants off. My customers are leaving right and left. We don't seem to keep our employees. But typically, that's only one part of the ongoing problems.
Okay.
So even though they come to me and say, well, our customers aren't satisfied, you often find out that the customer's not satisfied because the employees aren't satisfied. You can't have an unhappy employee trying to make a customer happy.
I can imagine. And once they do go through your process, what is usually the outcome? What do they gain from the process?
Well, the outcome is always very positive because if we can't make a difference, we don't stay engaged.
Okay.
And so we work on the premise, if you think about consultants, one of my comments to a client is consultants write reports, we deliver results. Which is it that you want? Now there's plenty of very good consultants out there that produce reports that come to no conclusion. We always come to conclusion and actionable items, and we guide our clients along the way to reach those goals.
Very interesting. Now I hear you're also an author. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I've written 14 books.
14.
Most of them are all about business questions and topics.
Okay.
As you could well imagine, in our short time together, I've got a lot to say, and I'm very opinionated. And often I will start on a project having no idea where it's going to take me. One of my favorite examples is I got hired by the Cremation Association of North America to give a keynote speech. And when they called me, I said, I know nothing about cremation. However, if you do hire me, I will learn about it.
Everything. Okay.
And I spent 100 hours researching the 1 hour speech.
Wow.
Now, the
dedication.
the ROI on that was obviously not very good. However, I got 14 other speaking engagements from that speech because I became an expert on cremation and how the cremation industry needs help. If you think about somebody who's passing away, there's really two stages. At need, which is when Uncle Harry dies,
Right.
and somebody has to take care of it.
Right.
Or pre-need, when I know at some point in my life I'm going to die, and I make those arrangements myself. The business model for cremation and all other funerals should be pre-need. Why? Because pre-need allows you to have an intelligent, unemotional conversation where you plan ahead. And interestingly enough, once you plan ahead, it's a great relief. Now, I've done my own pre-need, even to the point of doing a videotape of my own eulogy.
Oh, wow.
Why would I do my own eulogy? Because I'd like to have a professional speaker delivering it that knew who I was.
I understand, definitely. So tell us about the process that you go through when you're writing your books. What exactly is that process like?
Usually it's something that's bothering me.
Okay.
I refer to as innovation is the product of discomfort.
Okay.
What's making me uncomfortable? Customer service in this country is terrible. We've outsourced almost everything. You can no longer talk to somebody based in the United States. You no longer can talk to a clerk that is empowered to make a decision. We've become a disposable society. If you're buying things from Asia, generally they don't consider fixing them. They throw them away and they get another one. Those are problematic for this country because we didn't grow up thinking that things were disposable.
Right.
And what has happened is that is now translated into a lot of the ways that employers look at employees. They're disposable. There's
That's
10 other people
definitely.
that are willing to work here, therefore. And that's really a problem because you've spent a lot of time and money investing in an employee, and sometimes you don't monetize your ROI and give enough time for it to work. On the other hand, sometimes they keep an employee way too long
Right.
because they're emotionally tied and he's got a family or she's been with us for a long time. And sometimes it's better for the employee to leave and things move on.
I've seen that firsthand.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of problems, let's go back to Shift Happens. When you are getting these individuals that are the main owners, or I should say operators of these businesses, what type of problems, can you speak on what type of problems they bring to you? What type of problems do they have that you have to sort out?
Well, it depends on the size of the company. If it's a startup company, you're often thinking about how am I going to make payroll? How am I going to pay rent? Sometimes it's a company that's in transition. They've hit a certain plateau and they can't move on to the next step. And then there's other companies where the founder doesn't have a legacy, doesn't have kids that are going to take over. So they've got to start thinking about selling the company to somebody else or merging with another company so that there is a legacy to keep the company moving on. So it really depends on what stage the company is and what size the company is.
Okay, great. Now, I hear you have partners within this business with you, correct, that help you facilitate these services?
Well, these are all associates.
Okay.
So what happens is you bring us a problem, and let's say, for conversation, it's a grocery store chain. And we've got somebody who was a senior vice president of one of the largest grocery chains, and he's about to retire.
Okay.
We bring in his expertise. We've got another person that's an expert in HR. I can't be an expert in everything,
Right.
but I can certainly find enough people that are experts in that. And I think of it as the cogs of a wheel, and I'm the center of that wheel spoke, but I've got all these other people that help make that wheel go round.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, we're going to take a short break, everyone, and we will be right back. Thank you for joining us on Higher Learning Network. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Higher Learning Network. I'm your host, Brittany Burt, and again, I'm here with Mr. James Feldman, who is the certified facilitator of Shift Happens. Welcome back, Mr. Feldman.
Thank you.
So earlier we were talking, and now I want to go into tell us about a day in your life. What is that like?
Well, a day in my life is like any other business. There's really three parts: trying to find new business, trying to service the business you have, and then trying to collect on the business that you've already completed.
And do you find that challenging at all, collecting on debts that are already owed?
When we started up, it was always difficult because you didn't have enough leverage. As we've grown and dealt with a lot of companies, our reputation precedes itself, and so we typically get an upfront retainer and we bill along the way. So by the time we're finished with the project, there's really very little money that's owed to us.
And that's great, definitely great. So tell us about your education personally.
I went to undergraduate school at the University of Illinois, and then I left and went to law school. Left law school, went back to graduate school. After graduate school, did continuing education. So 2 masters, law school, and then continuing education.
Wow, that's great. Now, I know earlier we talked about your childhood. What was it like growing up in your house as far as parenting goes? How did your parents guide you?
Well, my father was a doctor, my mother was a real estate broker, and they pretty much left me alone.
Okay.
And I started my first real income stream when I was 12 years old. I was given a Polaroid camera for my bar mitzvah, took a picture of my father at the Rotary Club. He was sworn in as president, and the local newspaper gave me $5.
Okay.
Since it cost me 50 cents to take the picture, I quickly realized that if you just moved the decimal point over 1, you had a perfect business. So if it cost me 50 cents and I could sell it for $5, I was very happy.
I can imagine. Now, I know you told me earlier you've written 14 books. Do you have a favorite in that collection of books?
Typically the book that I'm writing at the time. It's
Okay.
the most topical. I'm currently working on a book called 3D Thinking: How to Rethink Your Problems from Inside the Box.
And what does that detail exactly? Is it for entrepreneurs who are trying to get off the ground, or what does it detail?
It's really a thinking process.
Okay.
Remember we talked about business as usual?
Yes.
And business as usual is really what's kept this country from moving forward. They don't like disruption, and innovation by its very nature is disruptive. And so this is a way to explain why disruption is good rather than an interference to business.
Okay. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, I also know that you do a number of seminars and workshops. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the workshops and seminars are typically done because clients have hired us to come out for a sales meeting or an annual conference. And one of the things we've started to do is offer them locally in Chicago.
Okay.
And so we have made a arrangement with some downtown office space, and we can take anywhere from 8 to 24 people at a time, so it's a very close one-on-one. And then we'll also bring it out to a larger company. So for instance, next week I'm going out to a very large company. We're doing a full day retreat where we're going to teach them how to discover innovation within their own organization.
Okay, sounds great. Now, how does one get involved in the workshops, or if there's an aspiring entrepreneur, how do they get involved?
Well, they could go to our website, which is www.shifthappens. On the website, there is a calendar with locations. If they want to do one privately or dedicated, they can just drop us a note and we can check our calendar.
Okay. And how long do these workshops usually last, and what do they consist of?
Well, there's a half a dozen topics, but
Okay.
often a company will come to us with a specific need. For instance, I'm doing a workshop on PowerPoint presentations.
Okay.
Because as you know, death by PowerPoint is pretty much all over corporate America, yet my PowerPoints are both entertaining, engaging, and informative. And I show people how to use all those tools, including the ability to be able to license movie clips
Okay.
and put them into PowerPoints. So for instance, Despicable Me is coming out this week. My opening for my PowerPoint that I'm doing next week is a scene from Despicable Me.
Okay, wow. Now, is there anything you find difficult about running Shift Happens, or even working with the entrepreneurs or the CEOs that you worked with? Is there anything that you find difficult about running it?
SOP, Standard
SOP.
Operating Procedure,
Okay.
not invented here. People don't like to admit when they're wrong. It's just human nature. And so you have to coach someone for them to realize that they're making a mistake or they're wasting a lot of money. I mean, if you talk to somebody who's got any kind of an addiction, if you talk to somebody who's had any kind of a shortfall in business,
Okay.
they always want to blame someone else.
Yes, clearly.
And until you start taking credit for the situation yourself, then you can't make changes.
So, do you allow yourself to work with those individuals who are having problems taking credit for the situations?
You always try to explain it to them.
Right.
It's like going to a doctor. A doctor doesn't come in and immediately prescribe an operation or medication. There's lots of questions. Typically, he sends in his nurse, and there's all kinds of questions to answer. Sometimes they want to get blood tests and workups so that they can become more informed. It's the same thing with a business. We refer to it as a body scan of the business. Someone comes to me and says, we've got a manufacturing problem. We really try to look at the whole business to see if that's the only problem.
Okay. And how much time personally do you find yourself dedicating towards Shift Happens?
100%.
100%, all the time.
All the time.
I'm sure. Sleepless nights?
Sleepless nights because I feel the pain. I'm often on an airplane. I'll look over at somebody's PowerPoint and I can't stop myself from saying, you got to be kidding me. No one's going to look at that PowerPoint. You've got way too much copy on it. Maybe we can revise 1 or 2 slides before the flight sits down. And I don't charge for it. One of my biggest clients got on the plane. He was looking like he had a bad day. I leaned over and I said, I think you're having a bad day. You want to talk about it? We talked for 4.5 hours.
Wow.
And a week later, they hired me.
Wow. Okay. So I can imagine you have the opportunity to travel a lot with working with Shift Happens.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's that like?
Well, traveling is not as much fun as it used to be. There are no friendly skies. TSA could certainly use my help. I mean, they can't seem to get it right. But at the end of the day, it's like any other business. The part that I have great difficulty with is when the airlines start to extract some of these fees that seem so onerous. For instance, charging you for your first piece of luggage. Anyone that's going on a
Right.
trip has a piece of luggage.
Of course.
It's a fact.
Of course.
Factor that into the price. Don't nickel dime me.
I understand.
You
I
know.
understand. And so I heard you earlier speak about you being a keynote speaker for a number of different things. What type of topics do you speak about when you go out to?
Well, typically they'll come to me with a specific outcome in mind.
Okay.
This is what we're hoping we can communicate to our audience. More often than not, we'll chat about what their objectives and strategies are, and we will customize. I do not do canned presentations. I do not give the same presentation to 50 different clients. Every one of them, I do my homework. All the slides are customized. All the information is customized, and I learn the language. Like I had mentioned to you, the Cremation Association.
Yes.
I had to learn an entirely different language. They're not customers, they're families. It's not ashes, it's cremated remains,
Right.
etc.
Okay, definitely. Well, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs, or even someone that's looking to start a business? You being so well versed within, facilitating and understanding business as a whole. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs?
Well, first of all, there's plenty of great examples. There's
Okay.
lots and lots of books. One of the books that I happen to like is How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, How to Think Like Thomas Edison. Any book that's been written about how Steve Jobs taught and thought. And if you can't read, then turn on Shark Tank, because at least you see 4 very successful entrepreneurs grill people who are asking for money. And it is always amazing to me how quickly these people come unraveled when they're asked very simple questions like, what's your gross sales? What's your margin? How big is the market?
Right.
What are you going to do with the money you're borrowing? And if you can't answer those basic questions, I'm not quite sure how you get on Shark Tank or even stay in business.
I can imagine. So, what do you feel is the largest downfall that many entrepreneurs have?
I think they go in wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and they don't do the numbers. They don't sit down and look at the downside. I've got a great product, I make great cupcakes, whatever. But you've got to start looking at how you're going to run a business. Let's take cupcakes. You need a health license. You need to be able to engage employees. If you have employees, you're going to have to pay health insurance. If you're going to have any employees, you're going to have to contribute to Social Security, etc. People
Right.
don't take that into account.
I can imagine.
So the question always becomes, how many cupcakes do you have to sell per day to be able to cover all that and make a profit? And the most important thing that entrepreneurs always forget is paying themselves. Pay
Definitely.
yourself first. If you don't, the business won't move forward.
Definitely, I can see that. So doing the numbers has to be one of the most important things
It's
that
the most important.
the most important thing that an entrepreneur can do. What else, as far as when someone is looking to start up a business, so that they won't have these downfalls or even have major deficits within their revenue? What else can they do?
Never underestimate your competition.
Okay.
If you've got somebody out there that's bigger, smarter, faster, you're not going to beat them down. Maybe the answer is you come up with a better process and license it to them. Maybe it's easier to join them than try to fight them.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you can come up with enough financial resources and get some people with experience, this is still the land of opportunity. There's still places where people can make a lot of money. And every single day, multimillionaires come out of 13-year-olds that invent
Yes.
some new app,
Yes.
or an 18-year-old that says, why don't we come up with a social media thing and call it the Facebook?
Right. So can you describe for me the most successful business owner? What do they possess within themselves?
Belief.
Belief. Okay.
Belief and single-minded focus. They've done their homework. They understand their competition. They look at the market. They've done the 3D thinking.
Okay.
They've gone inside, they go outside, and they've got a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're never going to succeed.
And when you're helping these companies, how important is it to weigh out the competition? I mean, I can imagine that's something that's very big. Being a small business owner myself, competition is huge. And I think that's something that a lot of business owners don't consider. So how important is that to weigh out the competition?
The biggest thing is, do you have a proprietary product? Can you build a fence around it? Because if you come up with a new idea and you haven't protected it, somebody will just steal it.
Yes.
Somebody will let you do all the heavy lifting,
Yes.
wait until you're strapped for cash, and they just come in and knock you off.
And do you see that? I can imagine you see that very often.
All day.
All day.
All day.
So I don't know if you can speak on this, but what exactly is your idea of a very successful business? When we look at all the major corporations we have, who's doing it right, in your opinion?
Well, I think Apple does it right,
Okay.
while Steve Jobs was alive. What they haven't done is come up with anything since he passed away, and there's great concern. On the other hand, the experience in the Apple store is phenomenal.
Okay.
The products that they're currently making are very good. However, Samsung and Android and others are starting to eat Apple's lunch and erode their market share. So you cannot sit back on history. You've got to constantly reinvent and perfect the things that you're doing. There are companies out there that nail it every single day, and there's companies out there that simply don't get it.
They don't get it. I can imagine. Okay. And I know you mentioned Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs as a person, as the innovator that he was, I can imagine that's someone that you feel as a person himself, aside from Apple, he did it right, correct?
He did it right, because
Okay.
what Steve did is he figured out a way to solve problems before people knew they had a problem. So if you can come to someone and say, here's the solution to a problem you're going to have in the very near future, you own it. If the person already has a problem, now other people are working on that solution as well.
Very, very good advice for entrepreneurs. So do it right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. It's very, very appreciated, Mr. Feldman, who is tell me one more time, the
Chief Certified
Facilitator of Shift Happens. Again, I'm your host, Brittany Burt, and we thank you for joining us on the Higher Learning Network.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Feldman, and I'm going to be with you in Vancouver. Smart leaders such as yourself are hungry for good ideas, and you know your future depends on relentless improvement, constant innovation, and breakthroughs. So join me in Vancouver, where I'm going to challenge your assumptions, change your perspective, let ideas run wild, encourage you to get wild, and train your brain. I'll provide you with a view that ultimately proves to be so compelling that you can never, ever see things quite the same way again. Together, we'll get rid of the common disabling conditions, we'll become creative, and I'm going to liberate the way you think and help you educate your talented staff. Because the event is at a casino, I calculated the odds of walking away with an ROI, and I promise that they're better than a blackjack table or roulette. You can bet on it. I'm going to focus on what counts, I'm going to deliver what's necessary, and I'm going to help you find more running room so that your talents can flex further and develop greater profit. It's time for the industry to take a leap, make changes, move out of the silos, and create more professional planning and seize opportunities. Join us in Vancouver. I look forward to helping you make Shift happen.